At 29 years old, millionaire Ethan Caldwell had never felt the touch of another person's lips against his own until the night a thunderstorm trapped him alone with his assistant, Marissa Green, and she became the woman who would shatter every wall he'd built around his heart. What started as an innocent confession in an empty office building would spiral into a love so intense that his own mother would stop at nothing to destroy it, convinced that Marissa was nothing more than a gold digger preying on her son's inexperience. But when cruel words and family pressure finally tore them apart, both Ethan and Marissa would discover that some connections run deeper than fear, stronger than doubt, and more powerful than the people who try to keep true love from finding its way. The question wasn't whether they belonged together. It was whether they'd be brave enough to fight for a love that everyone else said was doomed to fail. If you're watching this incredible love story unfold, hit subscribe and tell me what city you're watching from. I love connecting with viewers from around the world. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the empty office floor as Marissa Green gathered the last of the day's paperwork. Her fingers moved quickly over the keyboard, finishing up the quarterly reports that Mr. Caldwell would need first thing Monday morning. The building had grown quiet an hour ago when the last of the staff headed home to their weekend plans. She glanced up at the glass-walled office where Ethan Caldwell sat, hunched over his desk, still working. Even from across the open workspace, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he ran his hand through his dark hair when he was concentrating too hard. At 29, he carried himself like someone much older, weighed down by responsibilities that seemed too heavy for one person to bear alone. Marissa had been his assistant for 8 months now, and she'd learned to read his moods like weather patterns. Today felt different, though. He'd been restless, distracted. 3 times he'd walked past her desk without his usual polite nod, and twice she'd caught him staring out the window with an expression she couldn't quite name. The elevator dinged in the distance, and she heard the security guard making his final rounds. Soon they'd be the only 2 people left in the 30-story building, something that had happened more often lately. Ethan worked late because he didn't seem to have anywhere else to go. Marissa stayed because leaving felt wrong when he was still here, still pushing himself through another endless day. She saved her work and closed her laptop, then looked up to find Ethan standing by her desk. He'd approached so quietly she hadn't heard him coming. "You don't have to stay," he said, his voice softer than usual. "It's Friday night. You should be somewhere fun." Marissa tilted her head, studying his face. His eyes were the kind of blue that reminded her of winter mornings, clear but cold. Tonight, though, they seemed warmer somehow, more uncertain. "I don't mind staying," she said. "Besides, where would I go? My sister's working a double shift at the hospital, and I already finished the book I was reading." A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "What book?" "Something about a woman who inherits her grandmother's bakery and falls in love with the town veterinarian." She shrugged, feeling a little silly. "I know it's not very sophisticated, but sometimes you just want a story where everything works out in the end." Ethan's expression shifted, becoming more serious. "Nothing wrong with wanting a happy ending?" Thunder rumbled in the distance, and they both turned toward the floor-to-ceiling windows. Dark clouds had gathered while they had been working, and the first drops of rain were beginning to streak the glass. "Looks like a big storm coming," Marissa said. "You can take my car," Ethan offered quickly. "I'll call a cab later." "That's sweet of you, but I'm fine taking the subway. I've been doing it for years." She gathered her purse and jacket, then hesitated. Something about the way he was standing there, hands shoved deep in his pockets, made her pause. "Are you okay? You seem, I don't know, different today." For a moment, she thought he might brush off her question with his usual polite deflection. Instead, he was quiet for so long she wondered if he'd heard her. "Can I ask you something?" he finally said. "Of course." "Do you ever feel like you're watching your life happen to someone else? Like you're standing on the outside looking in, but you can't figure out how to step through the glass?" The question caught her off guard. In all the months she'd worked for him, Ethan had never said anything so personal. Their conversations usually revolved around schedules and meetings, the safe territory of professional politeness. "Sometimes," she said honestly, "especially when I was younger. I felt like everyone else had figured out some secret about how to be confident and comfortable in their own skin, and I was still pretending I knew what I was doing." "What changed?" Marissa thought about it, really considered the question instead of giving him an easy answer. I guess I realized that most people are pretending too. We're all just doing our best with what we know, and hoping it's enough. The rain was coming down harder now, drumming against the windows with increasing intensity. The automatic lights had dimmed to their evening setting, casting the office in a warm, amber glow that made everything feel smaller, more intimate. I don't think I'm very good at pretending, Ethan said quietly. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Marissa felt something shift in the air between them. It was subtle, like the moment before lightning strikes when the whole world seems to hold its breath. I should let you go, he said, but he didn't move away from her desk. The rain's pretty bad. Maybe we should wait it out for a few minutes. It was a reasonable suggestion, practical even. But as soon as she said it, Marissa knew they'd crossed some invisible line. The office felt different now, charged with possibility and something that might have been hope. Ethan nodded slowly. Would you like some coffee? There's still some in the break room. That sounds nice. They walked together toward the small kitchen area, their footsteps echoing in the empty space. Ethan poured 2 cups of coffee from the pot that had been sitting there since morning and handed one to Marissa. Their fingers brushed as she took it, and she noticed the slight tremor in his hand. Are you nervous? She asked gently. I'm always nervous, he admitted with a self-deprecating laugh. You just don't usually see it. They settled at the small table in the break room, sitting across from each other like they were having lunch instead of hiding from a storm after hours. The coffee was bitter and too strong, but neither of them seemed to mind. Can I tell you something? Ethan said, staring down at his cup. Sure. I don't really know how to talk to people. I can handle business meetings and presentations, things that have a script. But regular conversation, getting to know someone, I'm terrible at it. Marissa leaned forward slightly. You're talking to me just fine. That's different. He paused, searching for the right words. You make it easy. You don't expect me to be someone I'm not. Why would I expect that? He looked up at her, and she saw something vulnerable in his expression. Most people do. They see the money, the company, and they think I must have it all figured out. They want me to be confident and charming and smooth, but I'm not any of those things. What are you then? The question hung between them, simple but loaded with meaning. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, and Marissa could see him wrestling with how honest to be. Scared mostly, he said finally, and lonely. I've been lonely for so long, I'm not sure I remember what it feels like to really connect with someone. The admission hit Marissa like a physical blow. She'd seen hints of his isolation in the way he ate lunch alone at his desk, in how he never mentioned weekend plans or friends. But hearing him say it out loud made her chest ache. That must be really hard, she said softly. It is. But I don't know how to change it. Every time I try to get close to someone, I freeze up. I say the wrong thing or I don't say anything at all, and they lose interest. He laughed bitterly. Not that there have been that many attempts. What do you mean? Ethan's cheeks flushed slightly, and he looked away. I've never really... I haven't had much experience with relationships. Marissa felt her heart speed up. There was something in his tone, a hesitation that suggested he was dancing around something bigger. How much experience? She asked gently. The silence stretched out between them, filled only by the sound of rain against the windows. When Ethan finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. None. None? I've never had a girlfriend, never been on a real date. I don't know how to flirt or be romantic or any of the things that normal people just seem to know. He buried his face in his hands. God, saying it out loud makes me sound like such a loser. You're not a loser, Marissa said firmly. You're just honest. He looked up at her through his fingers. You're not horrified? Why would I be horrified? So you haven't dated much. So what? That doesn't define who you are as a person. It feels like it does sometimes. Like there's this whole part of life that everyone else gets to experience, and I'm stuck on the outside, watching it happen. Marissa reached across the table and gently pulled his hands away from his face. Can I ask you something personal? He nodded, though she could see the wariness in his eyes. Have you ever kissed anyone? The blush that spread across his cheeks was answer enough, but he shook his head anyway. Not even when you were younger? High school? I was homeschooled. My mom was very protective after my dad died. She thought regular school was too risky, too unpredictable. I had tutors and structured activities, but I never really got to just be around other kids my age. He shrugged. By the time I got to college, everyone else seemed so much more sophisticated. I felt like an alien trying to figure out human behavior. Marissa's heart broke a little more with each word. She could picture him as a lonely teenager, watching his classmates navigate crushes and first relationships while he remained on the sidelines, too afraid or too sheltered to join in. That must have been incredibly isolating, she said. It was, but it's not like I can go back and change it now. I am who I am. And who you are is pretty wonderful. Ethan stared at her in surprise. You really think that? I know it. You're kind and thoughtful and genuinely care about the people who work for you. You remember my sister's name and ask about her nursing program. You always say, please and thank you, even for things that are technically my job. You're patient when I make mistakes, and you never make me feel stupid for asking questions. Those are just basic manners. You'd be surprised how uncommon basic manners are, especially in your position. A lot of powerful people forget that the rest of us are human. I'm not powerful. I just inherited a company I never really wanted. That's exactly what I mean. You could be arrogant or entitled, but you're not. You treat everyone with respect, regardless of their job title or how much money they make. Ethan was looking at her like she'd just told him the moon was made of cheese. I don't see myself the way you do. Maybe that's part of the problem. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the rain and the distant rumble of thunder. The storm seemed to be moving closer, and the occasional flash of lightning illuminated the darkening office around them. Marissa, Ethan said finally. Yeah? Can I tell you something else? Something I've never said out loud before? She nodded, sensing that whatever he was about to share would be important. I'm 29 years old, and I've never kissed anyone. I don't know what it feels like to hold hands with someone I care about, or to fall asleep next to another person, or to have someone who's genuinely happy to see me at the end of the day. His voice was quiet, but steady, like he'd been practicing these words in his head. Sometimes I wonder if there's something wrong with me, if I'm broken in some fundamental way that can't be fixed. There's nothing wrong with you, Marissa said fiercely. You're not broken, Ethan. You're just inexperienced, and there's a difference. Is there? Yes. Broken implies something that can't be repaired, but inexperience? That's just a starting point. Everyone has to start somewhere. Even at 29? Especially at 29, because by now you know who you are and what you want. You're not fumbling around trying to figure out your identity while you're also trying to navigate a relationship. Ethan leaned back in his chair, considering her words. I never thought about it that way. Most people don't. We get so caught up in timelines and what we think we're supposed to have accomplished by certain ages that we forget life doesn't actually work that way. Everyone's journey is different. What about you? He asked. What's your journey been like? Marissa smiled. Messy. I dated some in high school, had a serious boyfriend in college who turned out to be not so serious about me. A few relationships since then that taught me what I don't want in a partner. Like what? Dishonesty, game playing, men who say one thing but mean something completely different. I'd rather be alone than with someone who makes me question my own instincts. That makes sense. The thing is, I've learned that the best relationships aren't about experience or having the perfect moves. They're about honesty and mutual respect and genuinely caring about each other's happiness. You really believe that? I do, because when you truly care about someone, you pay attention to what they need, what makes them smile, what makes them feel safe. You don't need a manual for that. You just need to be present and authentic. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was so soft she had to lean forward to hear him. I think you might be the kindest person I've ever met. The words hit her like a warm wave, spreading through her chest and making her breath catch. There was something in his eyes when he looked at her, something open and hopeful that made the air between them feel electric. Ethan, she said gently, I know this is probably inappropriate, and I don't want to make you uncomfortable, but sitting here with you, talking like this, It's the most connected I've felt to another person in years, maybe ever. Marissa's heart was racing now, but not from fear. There was something beautiful about his honesty, his willingness to be vulnerable, despite his obvious nervousness. "It doesn't make me uncomfortable," she said. "It makes me feel honored that you trust me enough to share something so personal." "Do you think—" he started, then stopped, shaking his head. "Never mind." "What?" "You can ask me anything. Do you think someone like you could ever be interested in someone like me? I know I don't have much to offer in terms of experience or confidence or any of the things women usually want." The question hung in the air between them, loaded with hope and fear in equal measure. Marissa could see how much courage it had taken him to ask, and she wanted to give him an answer that was both honest and kind. "I think," she said carefully, "that you have a lot more to offer than you realize. And I think the right person won't care about your experience level. They'll care about who you are as a person. But what about you specifically? Could you see yourself with someone like me?" The directness of the question surprised her, but she could see that he needed a real answer, not a diplomatic deflection. "I could," she said softly. "But Ethan, this is complicated. I work for you, and there's a power dynamic that we'd have to navigate very carefully. Plus, you're talking about something really significant. Your first relationship, your first kiss. That's not something to rush into. I know, I'm not asking you to marry me or anything crazy like that. I need to know if there's a possibility, if maybe, somehow, we could figure out how to make this work." Marissa looked at him across the small table, taking in his earnest expression, the hope in his eyes, the way he was holding his breath waiting for her answer. She thought about all the months of working together, of getting to know his gentle nature and quiet strength. She thought about how safe she felt with him, how he never made her feel like she had to be anything other than herself. "There's a possibility," she said finally, "but we'd have to take things very slowly, and we'd have to be completely honest with each other about what we're feeling and what we need." The smile that spread across Ethan's face was like sunrise after a long, dark night. "Really? Really? But Ethan, I need you to understand something. If we're going to explore this, it has to be because you genuinely want to be with me, not because I'm convenient or available. I won't be someone's practice relationship." "It wouldn't be like that," he said quickly. "Marissa, you're everything I never knew I was looking for. You're smart and funny and patient and beautiful. Being with you wouldn't be settling or practicing. It would be choosing the person I actually want to be with." The sincerity in his voice made her chest tight with emotion. "That's a beautiful thing to say. I mean every word." They looked at each other across the table, the air between them charged with possibility and nervous energy. Outside, the storm was beginning to pass, but neither of them seemed to notice. "So what happens now?" Ethan asked. "Now we take it one step at a time," Marissa said. "No pressure, no expectations. Just see what develops." "I'd like that." "Good. But first, there's something I need to know. Are you sure about this? Because once we cross this line, we can't go back to the way things were. Even if it doesn't work out between us, our professional relationship will be different." "I'm sure," he said without hesitation. "I've been thinking about this for weeks, maybe months. I just never thought I'd have the courage to say anything." "What gave you the courage today?" Ethan smiled, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked completely relaxed. "You did. The way you listened without judging, the way you made me feel like maybe I'm not as hopeless as I thought, you make me want to be brave." The words went straight to her heart, and Marissa felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. "You are brave. It takes courage to be this honest about what you want." "I want you," he said simply. "I want to learn how to be in a relationship with you. I want to figure out how to make you happy." "And I want to help you figure it out," she said. "But can I ask for something?" "Anything. Can we start with just talking? Really getting to know each other outside of work? I think that's the foundation we need before anything else." "I'd love that." They were interrupted by a flash of lightning, followed immediately by a crash of thunder that seemed to shake the entire building. Both of them jumped, then laughed at their reaction. "I should probably get going," Marissa said, though she made no move to stand up. "The storm seems to be moving away, and I don't want to worry my sister." "Of course, but before you go, Ethan hesitated, then seemed to gather his courage. Would you maybe want to have coffee with me tomorrow? Not as boss and employee, but as us? I'd love to. Really? Really? There's a little cafe near my apartment that makes amazing blueberry scones. How about 10 o'clock? That sounds perfect. They gathered their things and walked back toward the elevators together. The office felt different now, transformed by honesty and possibility. As they waited for the elevator, Ethan turned to her. Thank you, he said. For what? For listening. For not making me feel like a freak. For giving me a chance. Thank you for trusting me with something so personal. That means more to me than you know. The elevator arrived and they stepped inside. As the doors closed and they began their descent, Marissa caught their reflection in the polished steel doors. They looked like two people on the verge of something beautiful and terrifying and completely unknown. Ethan, she said as they reached the ground floor. Yeah? Tomorrow's going to be wonderful. I hope so. I know so. As they stepped out into the lobby, Marissa felt like she was stepping into a completely different world than the one she'd inhabited just a few hours ago. Everything looked the same, the marble floors, the security desk, the glass doors leading out to the rain-soaked street, but everything felt different. See you tomorrow, she said as they reached the entrance. See you tomorrow, he replied, and the words felt like a promise. Marissa walked out into the gentle rain, her heart full of hope and her mind racing with possibilities. Behind her, through the glass doors, she could see Ethan watching her go, and she knew that whatever happened next, neither of them would ever be quite the same. The storm had passed, leaving the air clean and full of promise, and for the first time in a long time, Marissa felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The cafe smelled like cinnamon and fresh coffee when Marissa pushed through the glass door at exactly 10 o'clock. She'd changed clothes 3 times that morning, finally settling on a simple blue dress that made her feel confident without trying too hard. Her hands were slightly damp with nerves as she looked around for Ethan. He was already there, sitting at a corner table by the window, looking just as nervous as she felt. When he saw her, his face lit up with a smile that made her stomach flutter. He stood up quickly, almost knocking over his chair in the process. "Hi," he said, his voice a little breathless. "Hi yourself." She couldn't help but smile at how flustered he looked. "You're early." "I've been here for 20 minutes. I was too nervous to be late." His cheeks turned slightly pink. "I ordered you a coffee. I hope that's okay. I remembered you like it with cream and 1 sugar." The fact that he'd paid attention to such a small detail made her chest warm. "That's perfect. Thank you." They sat down across from each other, and for a moment, neither of them seemed to know what to say. The silence wasn't uncomfortable exactly, but it was charged with awareness of what had changed between them. "This feels different," Ethan said finally. "Good different or bad different?" "Scary different, but good scary, if that makes sense," Marissa nodded. "Like standing at the edge of a diving board. You want to jump, but your brain keeps reminding you that you might land wrong." "Exactly." He leaned forward slightly. "Did you sleep at all last night? Because I think I got maybe 2 hours. I kept replaying our conversation and wondering if I'd said too much." "You didn't say too much, and no, I didn't sleep much either, but not because I regretted anything. I kept thinking about what you said, about feeling like you're watching your life happen to someone else." "What about it?" "I felt that way too, but for different reasons. I've spent so much time protecting myself from getting hurt that sometimes I wonder if I'm protecting myself right out of actually living." Ethan tilted his head. "What do you mean?" Marissa wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, using the warmth to steady herself. "I told you about my ex-boyfriend in college, the one who wasn't as serious as I thought." "Yeah. I found out he was seeing 2 other girls at the same time. He'd told all 3 of us that we were special, that he could see a future with us. When I confronted him about it, he laughed and said I was naive for thinking college relationships were supposed to be exclusive. That's awful. It was humiliating. But the worst part was that I'd ignored so many red flags because I wanted to believe what he was telling me. After that, I promised myself I'd never be that trusting again. But being careful isn't the same as not living. Isn't it, though? When you're so focused on protecting yourself that you can't let anyone get close? I've been on plenty of dates since then, but I always find reasons to end things before they get serious. Too pushy, too distant, too something. Maybe some of those guys were actually decent, and I just couldn't see past my own fear. Ethan was quiet for a moment, considering her words. So we're both scared, just for different reasons. Seems like it. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. Maybe we can figure it out together. The simple honesty of his words made her heart skip. I'd like that. They ordered the blueberry scones Marissa had promised, and the conversation began to flow more naturally. Ethan told her about growing up in a house that felt more like a museum than a home, where every surface was perfectly clean and every schedule was precisely planned. Marissa shared stories about her childhood with Lila, how they'd raised each other as much as their single mother had raised them. You and your sister are really close, Ethan observed. We had to be. When your mom is working 2 jobs just to keep the lights on, you learn to depend on each other. She smiled. Lila is the practical one. She's the one who convinced me to go to college, who helped me figure out how to apply for financial aid. I probably would have just kept working at the grocery store forever if it wasn't for her. What did she think when you told her about taking the assistant job? Marissa's smile faltered slightly. She was worried. She thought working for someone so wealthy might be complicated. Was she right? I don't know yet, Marissa said honestly, but I know that you're not what she expected. You're not what I expected either. What did you expect? Someone entitled, someone who would treat me like I was invisible or disposable, someone who wouldn't know my name after working together for 8 months. And instead? Instead, I got someone who brings me tea when I'm having a bad day and who always asks about my weekend plans, even though you don't really have any of your own. She paused. Why don't you have plans, Ethan? I know you don't have many friends, but what do you do with your free time? Mostly I read, or work on old cars in my garage. You work on cars. I know it doesn't fit the image, but I like fixing things with my hands. There's something satisfying about taking something broken and making it work again. He shrugged. Plus, cars don't judge you for being awkward. Marissa laughed. That's actually really cool. What kind of cars? Classic muscle cars, mostly. I have a 1969 Camaro that I've been restoring for about 3 years. It's almost finished. Can I see it sometime? The question seemed to surprise him. You'd want to? Of course. It's obviously something you're passionate about, and I'd love to see what you've been working on. Most women aren't interested in greasy car parts. I'm not most women, she said simply. Ethan's smile was soft and genuine. No, you're definitely not. They spent another hour talking about everything and nothing. Books they'd read, movies they'd loved, embarrassing childhood stories that made them both laugh until their sides hurt. It was easy in a way that Marissa hadn't expected, like they'd been having conversations like this for years instead of carefully maintaining professional distance. When they finally left the cafe, neither of them wanted the morning to end. Would you like to walk for a bit? Ethan asked. There's a park nearby. I'd love to. They strolled down the tree-lined street, their shoulders occasionally brushing as they walked. The autumn air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and the promise of winter. Marissa found herself stealing glances at Ethan, noticing things she'd never paid attention to before. The way his hair caught the sunlight, the strong line of his jaw, how his hands moved when he talked. Can I ask you something? He said as they entered the small park. Sure. Last night when you said there was a possibility for us, did you mean it? Or were you just being kind? The vulnerability in his voice made her stop walking. She turned to face him, wanting him to see the sincerity in her expression. I meant it, Ethan. I wouldn't have said it if I didn't. It's just, this morning I started wondering if maybe you felt sorry for me, the pathetic 29-year-old who's never been kissed. Stop. The sharpness in her voice made him blink. Don't talk about yourself that way. You're not pathetic, and you're not a charity case. Do you really think I would risk my job and my emotional safety just because I felt sorry for someone? I don't know. You're incredibly compassionate. I am compassionate, but I'm not stupid. If I'm considering this, it's because I see something real between us, something worth exploring. They found a bench overlooking a small pond and sat down side by side. The space between them felt charged, like there was an invisible thread pulling them closer together. "What do you see?" Ethan asked quietly. "I see someone who's genuine and thoughtful and who treats everyone around him with respect. I see someone who's been hurt by loneliness but hasn't let it make him bitter. I see someone who's brave enough to be honest about what he wants, even when it scares him. And that's enough? Even without experience or confidence or any of the usual things?" "Ethan, can I tell you a secret?" He nodded. "Some of the most experienced guys I've dated were terrible at relationships. They knew all the moves, all the right things to say, but they didn't actually care about making me happy. They were just going through the motions." She turned to face him more fully. "You not having experience doesn't scare me. You not caring about my feelings would scare me. But I already know that's not who you are." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I've been watching you for 8 months. I've seen how you treat people when you think no one is paying attention. I've seen you stay late to help new employees feel welcome. I've seen you remember birthdays and ask about people's families. Those aren't things you can fake." Ethan was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the water. "I keep waiting for you to change your mind, to realize this is all a mistake. What would it take for you to believe that I won't? I don't know. Time, maybe? Proof that I'm not going to disappoint you?" "You don't have to prove anything to me," Marissa said gently. "But if time is what you need, we have plenty of that. What if I'm terrible at this? What if I don't know how to be what you need? Then we'll figure it out together. That's what relationships are, two people learning how to make each other happy." She smiled. "Besides, I'd rather be with someone who cares enough to worry about disappointing me than someone who assumes he knows exactly what I want." A duck landed on the pond with a soft splash, sending ripples across the surface. They watched it paddle around, comfortable in the silence that had settled between them. "Marissa," Ethan said eventually. Would it be okay if I held your hand?" The question was so sweet, so carefully asked, that it made her heart ache in the best possible way. "I'd like that." He reached over slowly, giving her time to change her mind, and gently took her hand in his. His palm was warm and slightly rough from working on cars, and his fingers were longer than hers. He held her hand like it was something precious that might break if he wasn't careful enough. "How does it feel?" she asked softly. "Perfect," he said, his voice full of wonder. "I always thought it might be awkward or that I wouldn't know what to do, but this just feels right." They sat like that for a while, hand in hand, watching the world go by around them. Marissa felt a sense of peace settle over her that she hadn't experienced in a long time. There was no pressure to be anyone other than who she was, no need to guard her words or hide her thoughts. With Ethan, she could just be herself. "I should probably head home," she said eventually, though she made no move to let go of his hand. "Of course, but before you go, would you maybe want to have dinner with me sometime this week? Somewhere nice, but not too fancy. I don't want you to feel like I'm trying to impress you with money. I'd love to have dinner with you. And Ethan, you don't need to impress me with anything other than who you are. You're already doing that." The smile that spread across his face was radiant. "Really? Really?" He walked her back to her apartment building, their joined hands swinging slightly between them. At the entrance, they both hesitated, neither wanting the day to end. "Thank you for today," Ethan said, "for giving me a chance, for being patient with all my questions and insecurities. Thank you for being honest with me, for trusting me with something so important." They looked at each other for a moment, and Marissa could see the question in his eyes. He wanted to kiss her, she realized, but he was too nervous to make the first move. "Ethan," she said softly. "Yeah? Next time you want to kiss me, you don't have to ask permission. As long as we're both feeling it, it's okay." His eyes widened slightly. "You want me to kiss you?" "I do, but not today. When it happens, I want it to be because the moment is right, not because we think we're supposed to." "How will I know when the moment is right?" "You'll know," she said with a smile. "Trust me." He nodded, though she could see the uncertainty in his expression. "Okay. I'll see you Monday at work?" "See you Monday." Marissa went upstairs to her apartment with her heart full of possibility. and her mind already planning what she might wear to dinner with him. Through her window, she could see Ethan walking down the street toward the subway, his hands in his pockets and a spring in his step that hadn't been there before. Her phone rang just as she was settling onto her couch with a cup of tea. "Hey, Lila," she answered, recognizing her sister's number. "Hey yourself, how was your mysterious coffee date?" It was... Marissa paused, trying to find the right words. "It was really good." "Good how? Good like he's nice but there's no spark, or good like you're about to do something that might change your whole life?" "The second one." There was silence on the other end of the line for a moment. "Marissa, please tell me you're being careful." "I am. But Lila, he's not what you think. He's not some arrogant rich guy who's going to break my heart for fun. He's actually incredibly sweet and genuine, and he's still your boss, and he still has the power to fire you if things go wrong." "I know that. We've talked about it." "Have you?" "Because it's easy to say you'll handle things professionally when everything is new and exciting. But what happens when the honeymoon phase ends and you're dealing with real problems? What happens if he decides he wants to date someone else? Can you honestly tell me you'll be okay working for him after that?" Marissa was quiet, considering her sister's words. They were valid concerns, ones she'd been trying not to think about too deeply. "I don't have all the answers," she said finally, "but I can't let fear of what might happen stop me from exploring what could be something really special. I'm not trying to be negative. I just don't want to see you get hurt. I know, and I love you for worrying about me, but sometimes you have to take a risk if you want something real. Just promise me you'll be smart about this. Don't let your feelings cloud your judgment. I promise. And if he hurts you, I'll key his fancy car." Marissa laughed. "He actually works on cars as a hobby. He'd probably just see it as a restoration challenge." "Seriously? That's surprisingly normal for a millionaire." "That's what I'm trying to tell you. He's more normal than you'd expect. He's just lonely and inexperienced, and trying to figure out how to connect with someone for the first time in his life." "Inexperienced how?" Marissa hesitated. It felt like a betrayal to share Ethan's secrets, even with her sister. "Let's just say he hasn't had many relationships." Oh wow, and you're okay with that?" "I'm more than okay with it. It's actually kind of refreshing, being with someone who doesn't have a bunch of baggage from past relationships. Just be careful, Mar. First relationships can be intense, especially for someone his age. Make sure he's not just using you to figure out what he wants before he moves on to someone else." "He's not like that." "How do you know?" "Because I've been watching him for 8 months. I know who he is when he thinks no one is looking. He's not manipulative or calculating. He's just scared and hopeful and trying to be brave." "Okay," Lila said, though she didn't sound entirely convinced. "I trust your judgment. Just take it slow, okay? Don't rush into anything you're not ready for." "I won't. We're taking things one step at a time." After they hung up, Marissa curled up on her couch and thought about her sister's concerns. They were valid, and she'd be lying if she said she wasn't worried about some of the same things. But sitting in that park with Ethan, holding his hand and feeling the genuine connection between them, all the logical concerns had seemed less important than the possibility of something beautiful. She thought about the wonder in his voice when he'd said holding her hand felt perfect. She thought about how carefully he'd asked permission before even that simple gesture. There was something so pure about his approach to all of this, so different from the games and manipulation she'd experienced with other men. Maybe that was naive. Maybe she was setting herself up for disappointment. But for the first time in years, she felt hopeful about love, about the possibility of finding someone who would value her heart as much as she valued his. Her phone buzzed with a text message, and she smiled when she saw Ethan's name on the screen. "Thank you for today. I can't remember the last time I felt this happy." "Sleep well." She typed back quickly, "Thank you for being brave enough to share yourself with me. Sweet dreams." As she got ready for bed, Marissa found herself humming softly, her heart light with anticipation for whatever came next. Monday would bring them back to the professional world, but something had fundamentally shifted between them. They'd crossed a line there was no going back over, and for the first time in a long time, that felt like exactly where she wanted to be. Outside her window, the city hummed with its usual energy, But inside her small apartment, everything felt peaceful and full of promise. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever complications arose from mixing business with pleasure, she was ready to face them. Because sometimes the risk of getting hurt was worth the possibility of finding something real. Monday morning arrived with a crispness in the air that matched the nervous energy humming through Marissa's veins. She'd chosen her outfit carefully, professional but not severe, approachable but not too casual. As she rode the elevator up to the office, she wondered if everyone would be able to see the change written across her face. The floor was already bustling with the usual Monday morning activity when she arrived. Ethan's office door was closed, and she could see him through the glass wall, head bent over his computer, looking like the composed executive everyone expected him to be. But when he glanced up and saw her, his whole face softened into a smile that was meant just for her. "Good morning, Marissa," he said when she knocked and entered his office with his daily schedule. "Good morning, Mr. Caldwell," she replied formally, very aware that Susan from accounting was walking past the open door. But their eyes held a beat longer than necessary, and she saw the slight flush that crept up his neck. It was like they were sharing a secret that no one else could see. "Your mother called about lunch on Wednesday," she said, settling into the familiar rhythm of their work relationship. "And you have the board meeting at 2. "Right, thank you." He paused, then lowered his voice. "Did you sleep well?" "I did," she smiled. "You?" "Better than I have in months." The simple exchange felt loaded with meaning, and Marissa found herself fighting back a grin as she headed back to her desk. This was going to be harder than she'd thought, pretending things were normal when everything had changed. The morning passed in a blur of emails and phone calls, but she found herself hyper-aware of Ethan's presence. Every time he walked past her desk, every time he spoke in meetings, she noticed things she'd never paid attention to before. The way he unconsciously straightened his tie when he was nervous, how his voice got softer when he was trying to be encouraging, the careful way he listened to everyone's input before making decisions. At lunch, she ate her sandwich in the break room while scrolling through her phone, trying to look normal even though her mind kept drifting to Saturday's conversation. She was so lost in thought that she didn't notice Thomas Reed approaching until he was standing right beside her table. "Marissa, isn't it?" he said, his smile friendly but somehow calculating. "Yes, Mr. Reed. How can I help you?" "I was just thinking about Ethan's schedule. He seems to be working quite a bit of overtime lately. I hope he's not overloading you with extra hours." There was something in his tone that made her careful. "Mr. Caldwell is very respectful of my time. If I stay late, it's usually because I choose to." "Of course. He's always been considerate that way." Thomas sat down across from her uninvited. "I've known Ethan since he was a teenager, you know. Watched him grow into the man he is today. He's got a good heart, but sometimes that makes him vulnerable to situations that might not be in his best interest." Marissa set down her sandwich, suddenly not hungry anymore. "I'm not sure I follow." "Oh, I'm not implying anything inappropriate. It's just that someone in Ethan's position has to be careful about relationships, both personal and professional. There are always people looking to take advantage of his kindness." The words hit her like a slap, even delivered with Thomas's practiced smile. "I would never take advantage of Mr. Caldwell." "Of course not. I'm simply saying that sometimes what seems like genuine interest can be motivated by other factors. Financial security, social advancement, that sort of thing." He leaned back in his chair. "I'm sure you understand my concern for his well-being." Marissa felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she kept her voice steady. "Mr. Caldwell is fortunate to have people who care about him, but I think he's capable of making his own decisions about who to trust." "Absolutely. I just hope that anyone who cares about him would put his best interests first, even if it meant stepping back from situations that could become complicated." With that, he stood up and walked away, leaving Marissa sitting alone with her heart racing and her appetite completely gone. The message had been clear. Stay away from Ethan, or face the consequences. She threw her barely touched lunch in the trash and walked back to her desk, trying to process what had just happened. Was Thomas speaking for himself, or was this coming from Ethan's mother? Either way, it was obvious that not everyone would be supportive of whatever was developing between her and Ethan. The afternoon dragged by, and she found herself distracted during the board meeting, barely able to focus on taking notes. Every time she looked at Thomas, she could feel his eyes on her, a reminder of their conversation and the warning it contained. When the meeting finally ended and the conference room emptied, Ethan lingered behind. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. "You seem distracted." "I'm fine, just tired." But he was studying her face with the same careful attention he gave to everything else, and she could see that he didn't believe her. Did something happen? She hesitated. Part of her wanted to tell him about Thomas's warning, but another part worried that it would only create problems. They were just beginning to explore whatever was between them. Did she really want to introduce family politics this early? "It's nothing," she said finally. "Just one of those days." Ethan looked like he wanted to press further, but other people were beginning to filter back into the office, ending their brief moment of privacy. "Would you like to talk later?" he asked quietly. "After work?" Before she could answer, Thomas appeared in the doorway. "Ethan, could I have a word?" "Of course." Ethan glanced at Marissa. "We'll finish this conversation later." She nodded and watched him follow Thomas down the hall, her stomach churning with anxiety. She had a feeling their lunch conversation was about to become very relevant. An hour later, Ethan returned to his office looking troubled. He closed his door and sat down heavily at his desk, running his hands through his hair in the gesture she now recognized as his stress response. Marissa knocked softly and entered without waiting for permission. "What's wrong?" "Thomas thinks I'm making a mistake." Her heart sank, but she tried to keep her expression neutral. "What kind of mistake?" "He didn't say it directly, but he thinks I'm getting too attached to you. He's worried about my judgment." "And what do you think?" Ethan looked up at her and she could see the conflict in his eyes. "I think he's scared that if I start making decisions based on what I want instead of what everyone else thinks is best, I might stop being so easy to control." The word surprised her. She'd never heard him speak so bluntly about the people around him. "But that doesn't mean he's wrong about this being complicated," he continued. "Maybe we're moving too fast. Maybe we should step back and think about what we're doing." "Is that what you want?" she asked quietly. "No, but maybe it's what I should want." Marissa felt something cold settle in her chest. "Ethan, if you're having doubts—" "I'm not having doubts about you," he said quickly. "I'm having doubts about whether I'm being fair to you. You shouldn't have to deal with family politics and workplace complications because I don't know how to navigate a relationship." "That's not your decision to make for me." "What do you mean?" "I mean that I'm a grown woman who can decide for herself what complications she's willing to accept. You don't get to protect me from choices I haven't even been allowed to make." Ethan stared at her in surprise. "I'm not trying to control you. I'm trying to be responsible by deciding what's best for me without asking what I actually want. That's not—" He stopped, considering her words. "Is that what I'm doing? You're assuming that the smart thing for me would be to walk away. But what if I don't want to walk away? What if I think what we have is worth some complications? Even if it means dealing with people like Thomas, questioning your motives?" So he knew about that. "Thomas talked to me today, too." "He did?" Ethan's expression darkened. "What did he say?" "He suggested that I might be taking advantage of your kindness, that maybe my interest in you isn't genuine." "That's ridiculous." "Is it? Because you just spent the last 10 minutes questioning whether we should continue this, which sounds like you might be wondering the same thing." Ethan stood up abruptly and came around his desk to where she was standing. "Marissa, I am not questioning your motives. I know you're not using me. I'm questioning whether I have the right to ask you to deal with all the baggage that comes with being involved with me. And I'm telling you that I want to make that choice for myself." They stared at each other for a moment, the air between them charged with frustration and something deeper. "This is our first disagreement," Ethan said quietly. "I know. How are we supposed to handle this? I have no idea how to fight with someone I care about." Despite her frustration, Marissa felt her heart soften. "We're not fighting. We're having a discussion about something we disagree on. It's actually pretty healthy." "It doesn't feel healthy. It feels terrible." "That's because you care about the outcome. If you didn't care about me or about us, this conversation wouldn't matter to you." Ethan considered this. "So what do we do now?" "We figure out what we both actually want instead of what other people think we should want." "I want you," he said without hesitation. "I want to see where this goes, complications and all, but I also want to protect you from getting hurt because of me. And I want to be with you, even if it means dealing with disapproving family advisors and awkward workplace dynamics. But I also want to be treated like an equal partner in this decision, not someone who needs to be protected from the consequences of her own choices." "I can do that," he said slowly. "I think I can do that." "Good. Because if we're going to make this work, we need to be honest about what we're feeling instead of trying to guess what the other person needs." "Is this what couples therapy feels like?" Marissa laughed despite herself. "I don't know, but if it is, we're apparently naturals." Some of the tension left Ethan's shoulders. "I'm sorry. I'm not used to having someone else's feelings to consider. I was so focused on not wanting to hurt you that I forgot to ask what you actually wanted. And I'm sorry for getting defensive. I'm used to having to fight for what I want, so I jumped to the conclusion that you were trying to make decisions for me. So we're okay?" "We're okay. But Ethan, if someone else tries to pressure you about this relationship, can you talk to me before you start second-guessing everything?" "Yes. And if someone makes you feel like you don't belong or like your feelings aren't valid, will you tell me instead of trying to handle it alone?" "Yes." They looked at each other for a moment, both seeming to realize that they'd just navigated their first real challenge as a couple. "Does this mean we can still have dinner this week?" Ethan asked hopefully. "It means we definitely should have dinner this week. We clearly have more to talk about than we can cover in stolen moments at the office. Tomorrow night? Tomorrow night sounds perfect." The rest of the week passed in a blur of stolen glances and carefully professional interactions. They were both hyper-aware of maintaining appropriate boundaries at work, but the undercurrent of excitement was impossible to miss. Ethan seemed more relaxed, more confident in his interactions with everyone. Marissa found herself smiling more, humming softly as she worked. Tuesday's dinner was everything she'd hoped it would be. Ethan had chosen a small Italian restaurant in a neighborhood far enough from the office that they were unlikely to run into colleagues. They talked for 3 hours about everything from childhood memories to future dreams, and when he walked her home, he'd taken her hand without asking, their fingers intertwining naturally. Wednesday brought lunch with Ethan's mother, and Marissa could see the tension in his shoulders when he returned from the restaurant. "How did it go?" she asked when they had a moment alone. "She asked a lot of questions about my schedule lately, whether I was spending time with anyone new." "What did you tell her?" "The truth, that I'm getting to know someone I care about and that I'm happy." "How did she take that?" "About as well as you'd expect. She wants to meet you." Marissa's stomach flipped. "Meet me how? As your assistant or as—" "I think she's hoping that meeting you will convince her you're just a friend, but I told her that wasn't the case." "And?" "And she reminded me that I have responsibilities to the family and the company that should come before personal relationships." "What do you think about that?" Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "I think I've spent my whole life putting other people's priorities ahead of my own happiness, and I'm tired of it." The simple statement sent a thrill through her chest. "That's a big realization." "It is, and it's scary, but it's also the first time I've felt like I'm living my own life instead of the life everyone else planned for me." Thursday evening, they met for coffee after work, and Ethan seemed nervous, fidgeting with his cup and avoiding eye contact. "What's wrong?" Marissa asked. "Nothing's wrong. I've been thinking about something, and I wanted to ask you about it." "Okay." "Saturday, when we were in the park, you said that next time I wanted to kiss you, I didn't need to ask permission." Marissa's heart started beating faster. "I remember." "Well, I keep thinking I want to, but I can't tell if the moment is right. How do I know?" She smiled at his earnest confusion. "Are you thinking about it right now?" "I've been thinking about it all week." "And how do you feel when you think about it?" "Nervous, but also eager, like something inside me is pulling toward you." "And how do I seem to you right now? Comfortable or uncomfortable?" Ethan studied her face carefully. "Comfortable. Happy, maybe? Then the moment is right." "Really?" "Really." He leaned forward slowly, giving her plenty of time to change her mind, and gently cupped her face with one hand. "Are you sure?" Instead of answering, Marissa closed the distance between them, pressing her lips softly against his. The kiss was gentle, tentative at first, but when she felt him respond, she deepened it slightly, her hand coming up to rest against his chest. When they finally broke apart, Ethan's eyes were wide with wonder. "Wow," he breathed. "Good wow or bad wow?" "Incredible wow. Is it always like that?" "Only when it's with the right person." He smiled then, the kind of smile that lit up his whole face. "So I did okay?" "You did better than okay." They sat together in the coffee shop, holding hands across the small table, both of them glowing with the happiness of a moment perfectly shared. Around them, other couples chatted and laughed, but Marissa felt like they existed in their own private bubble of contentment. "I have something to tell you," Ethan said as they prepared to leave. "What?" "I think I'm falling in love with you." The words hit her like a wave of warmth, spreading through her chest and making her breath catch. That's a pretty big thing to tell someone. "I know, and I know it's probably too soon to say it, but I wanted you to know. I wanted to be honest about what I'm feeling." "Can I tell you something?" "Anything." "I think I'm falling in love with you too." The smile that spread across his face was radiant. "Really?" "Really." As they walked out of the coffee shop together, hands intertwined and hearts full of new possibilities, Marissa felt like she was stepping into a completely different life than the one she'd been living just a week ago. It was scary and thrilling and uncertain all at once. But as she looked at Ethan, saw the joy and hope in his expression, she knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like more than enough. The following Monday brought attention to the office that Marissa could feel the moment she stepped off the elevator. Helen Caldwell was sitting in the reception area, her silver hair perfectly styled and her expression carefully neutral. When she saw Marissa, her smile was polite but cold. "Ms. Green, isn't it? I'm Helen Caldwell, Ethan's mother. I was hoping we could have a chat." Marissa's heart sank, but she managed to keep her voice steady. "Of course, Mrs. Caldwell. Would you like some coffee?" "That would be lovely." They settled in the small conference room with their coffee, and Helen wasted no time getting to the point. "Ethan tells me you've become quite close." "We have. He also tells me he's told you about his inexperience with relationships." The way she said it made it sound like a shameful secret. "He has." "Then you understand how vulnerable that makes him, how easy it would be for someone to take advantage of his naivety." Marissa felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Mrs. Caldwell, I would never. I'm not saying you would do it intentionally, dear, but surely you can see how this situation might appear to others. A young woman in a subordinate position, someone who depends on my son for her livelihood, suddenly becomes romantically interested in him. It raises questions. The only question it should raise is whether we care about each other, which we do." Helen's smile became even more strained. "I'm sure you believe that. But Ethan has always been impressionable. He sees the best in people, sometimes to his own detriment. And you think I'm taking advantage of that? I think you're a young woman with limited options who's found herself in a position to potentially improve her circumstances significantly. I don't blame you for that, but I won't stand by and watch my son get hurt." The words hit Marissa like physical blows, each one carefully chosen to wound. "You don't know anything about me or my feelings for your son." "Don't I? You work as an assistant, Ms. Green. You live in a modest apartment and worry about student loans. Suddenly you're involved with a man who could solve all those problems with a single check. Are you honestly telling me that hasn't occurred to you?" Marissa stood up abruptly, her hands shaking with anger and hurt. "This conversation is over. Sit down, please. We're not finished." "Yes, we are. You've made it clear what you think of me, and I've made it clear that you're wrong. Anything else we have to discuss can include Ethan." She walked out of the conference room with as much dignity as she could muster, but inside she was crumbling. Helen's words had hit every insecurity she'd ever had about their relationship, every doubt she'd tried to push away. At her desk, she tried to focus on work, but her hands were still trembling. When Ethan emerged from his office 20 minutes later and saw his mother sitting in the conference room, his expression darkened. "What is she doing here?" he asked quietly. "She wanted to meet me. It didn't go well." Ethan's jaw tightened. "What did she say?" "It doesn't matter." "It does matter. You're upset." Before Marissa could respond, Helen appeared beside them, her composure completely intact. "Ethan, darling, I was just getting to know Ms. Green better." "Mom, what are you doing here? Can't a mother check on her son? You've seemed so distracted lately." "We'll talk about this later, at home." "Of course. It was lovely meeting you, Ms. Green. I do hope we'll see more of each other." After she left, Ethan turned to Marissa with concern written all over his face. "Tell me what she said." "She thinks I'm using you, that I'm only interested because of your money." "That's ridiculous." "Is it? Because sometimes I wonder if she might be right." Ethan stared at her in shock. "You don't actually believe that?" "I don't know what I believe anymore. Maybe I am just a girl from the wrong side of town who got swept up in the fantasy of dating a millionaire." "Stop. That's not who you are, and it's not what this is." "How can you be so sure? You said it yourself. You don't have any experience with relationships. Maybe you don't know the difference between genuine feelings and just being grateful for attention." The words came out harsher than she'd intended, and she saw them hit him like a slap. His face went pale, and for a moment, he looked like the insecure, lonely man who'd confessed his fears to her 2 weeks ago. "Is that really what you think?" he asked quietly. "I don't know what I think. Your mother made some very compelling points about my motives. My mother doesn't know you. And maybe you don't either. Maybe we both got caught up in the excitement of something new and different, and we mistook that for real connection." Ethan was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "If that's what you believe, then maybe we should take some time apart, figure out what this really is." Part of her wanted to take it back, to tell him she was just scared and hurt and saying things she didn't mean, but Helen's words kept echoing in her head, poisoning every memory of the past 2 weeks. "Maybe that's a good idea," she heard herself say. The pain that flashed across his face was immediate and devastating, but he nodded slowly. "Okay, we'll keep things professional for now." "Professional," she agreed, even though the word felt like glass in her throat. The rest of the week passed in miserable slow motion. They were polite to each other, coldly professional, but the easy warmth they'd shared was gone. Ethan seemed to retreat into himself, becoming distant, not just with her, but with everyone. The light that had begun to shine in his eyes was extinguished, replaced by the same guarded loneliness she'd seen when they first met. Marissa threw herself into work, staying late and taking on extra projects to avoid the silence of her apartment. But no amount of busy work could quiet the voice in her head that kept replaying Helen's accusations and wondering if they might be true. By Friday, she was exhausted and miserable. She was packing up her desk when her phone rang. "You sound terrible," Lila said without preamble. "Thanks for the pep talk." "What happened? Last time we talked, you were practically floating on air about this guy." "His mother happened." "Ah, the classic disapproving mother routine. What did she say?" Marissa found herself recounting the entire conversation, including her own doubts and the way things had fallen apart with Ethan. "Okay, let me get this straight," Lila said when she finished. "You broke up with him because his mother planted seeds of doubt about your own feelings?" "It's more complicated than that." "Is it? Because it sounds like you let some bitter woman convince you that you don't know your own heart." "Lila, no, listen to me. I've been worried about this guy from the beginning, you know that. I've been waiting for him to show his true colors or break your heart or turn out to be just another rich jerk playing games. But you know what I've seen instead?" "What?" "I've seen my sister happier than she's been in years. I've seen you excited about the future instead of just getting through each day. I've seen you glow when you talk about him and not because of his bank account. But what if she's right? What if I am just, Mar, stop. I know you. You're the woman who turned down Marcus Chen when he offered to pay off your student loans if you'd go out with him. You're the woman who's never once asked a guy to pick up the check, even when you were eating ramen for a week because you were broke. You think I don't know the difference between my sister falling for a man and my sister falling for a lifestyle?" Marissa was quiet, considering her sister's words. "Besides," Lila continued, "if you were really a gold digger, don't you think you would have made a move on him months ago instead of waiting for him to make the first move?" "Maybe. Definitely. You spent 8 months treating him like any other boss, remember? It wasn't until he opened up to you that anything changed. That's not how opportunistic women operate. So what do I do now? I basically accused him of not knowing his own feelings. I don't know how to come back from that. You apologize. You tell him you were scared, and you let someone else's doubts become your own, and you hope he forgives you. What if he doesn't? Then you'll know you tried. But Marissa, if this man is half the person you've described, he's probably just as miserable as you are right now. After they hung up, Marissa sat in the empty office thinking about everything Lila had said. Had she really thrown away something beautiful because she'd let Helen Caldwell's poison get into her head? She thought about the past 2 weeks, the happiness she'd felt, the way Ethan had looked at her like she was something precious and wonderful, the careful way he'd asked permission before taking her hand. The wonder in his voice when he'd said falling in love with her felt like waking up from a long sleep. None of that had been fake. None of that had been about money or status or anything other than two lonely people finding each other. Monday morning, she arrived at the office with a plan. She was going to apologize to Ethan, explain what had happened with his mother, and hope they could find their way back to each other. But when she got to her desk, there was an envelope with her name on it in Ethan's careful handwriting. Inside was a letter, and as she read it, her heart sank further with each word. Marissa, I've been thinking about what you said, about us getting caught up in the excitement of something new. Maybe you're right. Maybe what I thought was love was really just gratitude for being shown kindness. I don't want to put you in a position where you feel pressured or uncomfortable at work. I've asked Thomas to help me find you a position at another company, something with better pay and opportunities for advancement. I think it would be best for both of us if we maintain some distance while we figure out what our feelings really are. I want you to know that knowing you, even briefly, has been one of the best things that ever happened to me. Whatever this was between us, real or imagined, it showed me what it might feel like to truly connect with another person. I'll always be grateful for that. I hope you'll be happy wherever your path leads. Ethan. By the time she finished reading, tears were streaming down her face. He was letting her go. He was giving her exactly what she'd said she wanted, distance and space to figure out her feelings. But it felt like her heart was being torn in half. She looked up through her tears to see Ethan's office door closed, his blinds drawn. Thomas was standing by the elevators with a briefcase, and when he saw her, he approached with what might have been sympathy. "He's not in today," he said gently. "He thought it might be easier this way." "Where is he?" "Taking some time off, clearing his head." "Thomas, I made a mistake. I need to talk to him." "I think he needs some space right now, Marissa. Maybe it's better to let him process this on his own." She stared at him, realizing that this was exactly what he'd wanted from the beginning. "You planned this." "I planned nothing, but I do think some distance will help both of you see things more clearly." "You're wrong. We were good together. We were happy." "Were you?" "Because from where I stood, it looked like two people trying to convince themselves that a complicated situation could somehow work out. It could have worked out. It was working out. Until it wasn't." Thomas walked away, leaving her, alone with the letter and the devastating realization that she'd lost something precious because she'd been too afraid to fight for it. That evening, she sat in her apartment staring at her phone, Ethan's contact information on the screen. She'd started to call him a dozen times, but each time she'd stopped herself. What could she say? That she'd been wrong? That she'd let fear convince her to throw away the best thing that had ever happened to her? Wednesday brought a job interview at a marketing firm across town. The position was everything Ethan had promised. Better pay, room for advancement, interesting work. It was exactly the kind of opportunity she'd been hoping for when she'd first taken the assistant job. But sitting in the interview, answering questions about her experience and goals, all she could think about was how empty it all felt without the possibility of seeing Ethan every day. Friday afternoon, she made a decision. She was going to find him and tell him the truth, that she'd been scared, that she'd let his mother's words poison her confidence, and that she'd made the biggest mistake of her life when she'd pushed him away. She tried his apartment first, but there was no answer. She called his office, but Thomas told her he was still taking personal time. Finally, in desperation, she remembered what he'd said about working on cars when he needed to think. She found him in his garage, bent over the engine of a classic Camaro, his white dress shirt discarded in favor of a grease-stained t-shirt. He looked up when he heard footsteps, and the hope that flashed across his face before he could hide it made her chest tight. "Marissa, what are you doing here?" "I came to tell you that I'm an idiot." He straightened up slowly, wiping his hands on a rag. "What?" "I'm an idiot, and I made the biggest mistake of my life when I let you walk away." "You didn't let me do anything. You made it clear that you thought what we had wasn't real." "I was wrong. I was scared and hurt, and I let your mother get inside my head with all her talk about gold diggers and ulterior motives." "My mother? She came to see me that Monday. She told me I was taking advantage of your inexperience, that I was only interested in your money. And instead of defending us, instead of trusting what I knew was true, I let her doubts become mine." Ethan's expression shifted from guarded to angry. "She had no right to do that." "No, she didn't. But I had no right to take it out on you." "I'm so sorry, Ethan. I'm sorry I hurt you. And I'm sorry I threw away something beautiful because I was too scared to fight for it." "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I love you. Not your money, not your status, not what you can do for me. I love the way you remember everyone's birthday and ask about their families. I love how carefully you listen when people talk to you. I love that you worry about being good enough for me instead of assuming you are. I love that you work on cars with your hands even though you could pay someone else to do it. I love your honesty and your kindness and the way you make me feel like the most important person in the room." Tears were streaming down her face now, but she pressed on. "I love that you were brave enough to tell me you'd never been kissed, and I love that you trusted me to be your first. I love that you see something in me worth fighting for, even when I can't see it myself." Ethan had gone very still, his eyes fixed on her face. "Most of all, I love that you made me feel like I was home, like I'd been wandering around lost my whole life until I found you. Marissa, I know you probably can't forgive me. I know I probably destroyed any chance we had when I questioned whether our feelings were real, but I needed you to know the truth. I needed you to know that what I felt for you was the most real thing I've ever experienced." The garage was quiet except for the sound of her sniffling and the distant hum of traffic. Ethan stood there for a long moment, just looking at her, and she prepared herself for him to tell her it was too late. Instead, he crossed the distance between them in 3 quick strides and cupped her face in his hands. "I love you too," he said quietly. "I've been miserable for 2 weeks because I love you and I thought I'd lost you. You haven't lost me. If you'll have me back, you'll never lose me." "Are you sure? Because I can't go through this again. I can't handle losing you twice." "I'm sure. I'm more sure of this than I've ever been of anything in my life." He kissed her then, soft and desperate and full of 2 weeks' worth of missing each other. When they broke apart, they were both crying. "I'm sorry too," he said. "I should have fought for us instead of just accepting that it was over. I should have come after you. We both made mistakes. But we're here now." "We're here now," he agreed. 3 months later, they were sitting in the same cafe where they'd had their first real conversation as something more than boss and employee. The autumn had given way to winter, and snow was beginning to fall outside the windows. "I have something to tell you," Ethan said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "Should I be worried?" "I don't think so. I hope not." He took a deep breath. "I told my mother that if she can't accept you as part of my life, she won't be part of it either." Marissa's eyes widened. "Ethan, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. She was out of line with what she said to you, and she was wrong about your character. I won't have the people I love treating each other with disrespect." "What did she say?" "She said she wants to try again. She wants to get to know you properly this time, without preconceived notions." "And you believe her?" "I believe she knows I'm serious about choosing my own happiness over her approval. Whether she changes her attitude or not is up to her, but it won't affect us either way." Marissa squeezed his hand. "I love you for standing up for us. I love you for coming back to me when you could have just accepted that we were over. I could never accept that. You're stuck with me now." "Good," he said, bringing her hand to his lips and pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles. "Because I never want to be unstuck." Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the city in a blanket of white that made everything look clean and new and full of possibility. They sat together in their corner booth, hands intertwined, planning a future that looked nothing like either of them had imagined, but everything like what they had always wanted. Love, it turned out, wasn't about experience or confidence or having all the right moves. It was about finding someone who saw you clearly and chose you anyway. It was about being brave enough to be vulnerable and strong enough to fight for what mattered. And as Marissa looked at Ethan, saw the love and certainty in his eyes, she knew they had both found something worth fighting for. Something that would last.